So today, we're going to dive into one of the biggest, most influential ideas in all of philosophy, utilitarianism. Now, on the surface, it offers this simple, almost mathematical way to figure out what's right and wrong. But as you're about to see, that simple formula can lead us to some really, really uncomfortable places.
All right, let me put you in a tough spot. Imagine you have to make a choice, and there's no way out. Someone is going to get hurt. Do you pick the option where one person suffers, or the option where 5 people suffer? Now, your gut probably says, well, obviously harm 1 to save 5. But what if that one person is totally innocent? And what if you have to be the one to actively cause their suffering to save the others? Suddenly, it's not so simple, is it? And that right there, that's exactly the kind of thorny problem utilitarianism was designed to tackle. It tries to slice right through all that emotional messiness with a single, powerful principle. A principle that people have been arguing about for more than 200 years. So what is this core principle? Well, at its heart, it's a deceptively simple idea. The right thing to do is whatever creates the greatest amount of good for the greatest number of people. So officially, utilitarianism says the best, most moral action is the one that maximizes utility. And utility is just a fancy word for happiness or well-being or pleasure. The goal is to get the most happiness and the least amount of pain and suffering for everyone involved. Simple as that. And this brings us to the absolute foundation of this whole idea. It's a type of consequentialism, which just means that for a utilitarian, the results are the only thing that matters. Your intentions could be totally pure. The act itself might seem good, but at the end of the day, the only real way to judge it is by the outcome. Did it make the world a happier place or a more miserable one? That's the bottom line. So, who came up with all this? Well, let's meet the 2 guys who really built this thing from the ground up. Jeremy Bentham and John Stuart Mill. Okay, so you have Jeremy Bentham, writing back in the late 1700s. He had this wild idea, to turn ethics into a science. He genuinely believed you could literally calculate the right thing to do just by measuring how much pleasure or pain an action would create.
And get this, he even made a system for it. He called it the hedonic calculus. It was basically a 7-point checklist to score any action. You look at things like, how intense is the pleasure? How long will it last? How many people does it affect? It was this really radical attempt to turn morality into a math problem. But then along comes his student, John Stuart Mill. Mill looked at this and said, okay, the basic idea is right, but focusing only on the amount of happiness misses something huge. For Mill, some kinds of happiness are just better than others. And this quote from him just nails it. Mill made this famous distinction between higher and lower pleasures. Lower pleasures are the physical ones, like having a great meal or just lazing around. You know, things a pig could enjoy. But higher pleasures are intellectual, emotional, creative. They're the things that make us uniquely human. And for Mill, no amount of lazy, pig-like satisfaction could ever be worth more than even a little bit of that higher, more human kind of fulfillment. Okay, but this is where the theory really gets put to the test. What happens when calculating the greatest good leads you to an answer that just feels deeply, fundamentally wrong? This is where utilitarianism goes on trial. I want you to consider this classic thought experiment. There's a sheriff in a small town. A riot is about to break out, and it's going to kill a lot of people. The sheriff knows he can stop the whole thing, right now, if he frames one innocent person for a crime. The angry mob already thinks this person is guilty, so they'll be satisfied, and the violence will just stop. So what should he do? If you run the cold, hard, utilitarian math, the answer seems to be frame the innocent person. One person suffers, but many, many lives are saved. The total happiness is maximized. And yet, for most of us, that feels completely monstrous, doesn't it? It just steamrolls right over the whole idea of justice and individual rights. The great novelist Fyodor Dostoevsky put this challenge in an even more haunting way. Would you agree to live in a perfect world, a paradise of happiness for all of humanity, if you knew it was all built on the endless suffering of just one tortured child? A strict, simple version of utilitarianism seems to suggest that, yeah, maybe you should. So you can see how these kinds of scenarios were absolutely devastating to the theory. So in the 20th century, utilitarian thinkers came up with a pretty clever way to refine the idea, to try and rescue it from these huge problems with justice. And this led to a major split. The original version is now called act utilitarianism. That's where you judge every single action on a case-by-case basis. But the new version is called rule utilitarianism, and it asks a totally different question. What if we focused on creating the best rules for society to live by, not just the best outcome in one specific moment? So, a rule utilitarian would look at our sheriff and say, yeah, framing the innocent guy might look like the best option right now, but a society that follows the rule, don't frame innocent people, is going to be a much, much happier and safer place in the long run. This pivot to rules allows the theory to get back in line with our basic feelings about justice and human rights. And look, this isn't just some dusty old philosophical debate. This kind of utilitarian logic is actually baked into the way our world works right now, often in ways we don't even notice. Think about it. When governments do a cost-benefit analysis for a new policy, they're weighing the good it will do for the many against the harm to the few. That's utilitarian thinking. The whole effective altruism movement, which pushes people to donate to charities that do the most provable good for the most people, that is pure modern-day utilitarianism. It's also at the heart of arguments for animal rights and how we should approach global poverty. You know, Bentham himself was way ahead of his time on this. His argument for including animals in our moral thinking is a perfect example. He basically said, look, the important question isn't whether they can think like us or talk like us. The only question that matters is, can they suffer? And if they can, then their suffering has to be included in our moral math. So at the end of the day, this 200-year-old theory is still incredibly powerful. It forces us to ask really hard questions about what we owe each other. So I'll leave you with this to chew on. When you make choices, big or small, how much are you thinking about the greater good? How much of a utilitarian are you, really?